Okay, since the hour is 10 o'clock, I'll go ahead and call the meeting the order of the Board of Supervisors of the County of Del Norte and the governing body of all other special assessment and taxing districts for which said board so acts is now meeting in regular session. Only those items that indicate a specific time will be heard at the assigned time. All other items may be taken out of sequence to accommodate the public and staff availability. At this point, Supervisor McNamer, would you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is it slipping off there? Any introduction of new employees? Okay.
This is Christopher Thorpe. He is our new Veteran Services Officer. He's been on now for pushing about a month. He has been in training most of that time. And as you know, there's been a complete turnover down to Veteran Services. And I'll let Chris introduce himself and say something.
Hi,
Welcome.
Christopher Thorpe. I'm a veteran myself, 1989 to 1992 of the Army. And I've been living back in the northern area for about 3 years now. I was working at the Workforce Center, RHS, and then recently went down to Eureka to work with vets down there at the Vietnam Vets of California. And now I'm back up here at the Veteran Service Office. So.
Excellent.
Pardon? Yeah, I grew up in Crescent City.
Cool.
That's always
Point.
nice.
Yeah.
Welcome back.
Yeah, great to have local back. So, welcome, Chris.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other new employees? Nope. Okay. County Council, any action from closed session?
Nothing to report.
Okay. So at this time, we will go into the agenda. We are going to, I'll request any deletions, corrections, or additions from the board members to the agenda at this time. In order to add an item to the agenda, the matter must have come to the attention of the county subsequent to the posting of the agenda, and the matter requires action before the next regular meeting of the Board of Supervisors. Any? Okay, seeing none. At this point, we'll receive other brief reports or announcements relative to the County of Del Norte programs and projects, progress of the 2x2 committees, goal committees, or staff travel training reports. So let's go ahead and start with Supervisor Finigan.
Sure, just had a couple of meetings. Started off after our meeting or 2 weeks ago with a first five meeting, Children and Families of Del Norte. A lot of the focus was on the vistas that we've had working with us and through the Healthy Communities Foundation grant. Excellent work being done by those individuals, and this community is really reaping the benefit of those partnerships and the help that they're generating. Then I stepped into a Tea Party meeting that I had never attended before and was questioned and allowed to make a presentation on just what the county is doing and some of our priorities, and the direction we're going was well received. Went and had CSAC, the State Association of Supervisors, sent me to an adaptive leadership, executive leadership symposium. It was done through the CSAC Institute, Leadership Institute, and it was put on by an extension of Harvard University, the Kennedy School of Government, Marty Linsky, who is well-renowned in that area of adaptive management, adaptive leadership, put it on. Just a great 2.5 days, intense, long sessions through dinner that just gave you a different way of looking at things. Just a lot of critical thinking and a lot of group work, and it was just something I think that everybody, if you had an opportunity to do, should do at some time, and something I'm sure I'll be able to put to use. Had a CSAC board meeting, the State Association board meeting. On that agenda, we took a position, CSAC did, to support the governor's initiative that will, if passed by the voters, will bring constitutional guarantees for the funding for the AB 109 realignment. We also, at that meeting, talked about the guiding principles for pension reform. CSAC has taken a position on pension reform and hopefully be the lead in that. Also, we had a meeting a letter that we considered at that meeting that had to do with the post office closures. While there are none scheduled for Del Norte at this time, There are several in rural counties as well as suburban and urban counties, but Humboldt County, for example, they're looking at Weot and Red Crest, and they're just some horrible closures that could go anywhere from 10 to 50 miles distance between some of the closures. So originally the closures were supposed to take place last July. Now they have allowed till May 15th for those for further input and reevaluation, and so both CSAC and RCRC has asked that they consider that. Then I had a meeting with the CSAC Conference Planning Committee looking at the LEDGE Conference. Encourage you all to go. It's coming up May 30th and 31st. Some of the speakers that we'll have scheduled so far is Robert Huff, the Senate Republican leader, Darrell Steinberg, the pro tem of the Senate, Diane Cummins, the special advisor on finance, as well as the governor should show up and talk to us. Then the next day I had a meeting with the Forest Service, RCRC, and CSAC regarding the MOU that I know we've discussed a little bit at this board. And it was a good opportunity because the Forest Service finally brought some people to the table that were from Washington, D.C. The people that were there were Cynthia Moses-Ned, liaison to state and local government from the Department of Interior, the Forest Service, Randy Phillips, the same liaison to the National Association of Counties, and then the Council for Environmental Quality, Horst Grensmehl, Associate Director of NEPA Oversight. The recommendation from all the supervisors that were there was to put it on the next agenda for RCRC as well as CSAC to adopt the MOU. It is not intended, and we'll talk about this further when it comes to this board because I think it's something we'll want to do. If the individual counties want to join in, fine. But more importantly, it's a starting point for communication between the organizations of RCRC and CSAC and the Forest Service and BLM. It states how they will communicate and the mandatory communication that must take place. It is not meant to supplant or take the place of any of the legal ones that we already have, such as cooperation or coordination, more importantly, but it is yet another tool in the toolbox. If counties want to be involved, a singular person can be delegated to be that contact point as well as the Board of Supervisors. So it's just another tool in the toolbox, if you will, to engage Washington, D.C. with the local elected governments. And the premise was that we're just not another party at the table. We are, in fact, a government, and we need to be treated as government to government. So that was, it took about a year to negotiate that, and that was something that will be brought forward and finalized. Then after that, I took a little trip up to Smith River the other day, your district up to Smith River School, took a look at the little early learning center, the preschool situation that's going there at Smith River School. Paige Swan, the principal up there, is doing a great job, but it's another partnership between First Fire and the community and the schools, sort of a mini family resource center. So a lot of good work going on, and I'll pass the hat.
All right, thanks. Supervisor McClure.
Yes, I've had a relatively light 2 weeks, but I did participate. I attended the school board meeting where the discussion was about medical emancipation rights of children being able to access confidential medical services. And there were people wishing that that would not be the case, and it is California law that that is allowed. And I expressed my concern that medical emancipation needs to happen, that children need to be able to access, and they can access for a variety of reasons. It can be family planning and reproduction, but it can also be mental health, and it can also be if they have been physically abused by someone, that they can access for help. And so it's a really important thing for children to be able to get help if they are finding it's not possible in their own private life. The Redwood Park Association has met, and we're continuing to explore the ideas of field institutes and how we go about doing that. We're finding that our first step is that we need to establish protocol with the national and state parks, and then have a plan to make sure that we're not offering the same program that the state or national park offers, but having an enhancement or a a longer visitor experience in the park, like that they may do a Redwood Ecology, which the park offers, but it may be a 3-day Redwood Ecology where people come and stay and do some research and get some information. So we're looking forward to getting that developed. It's probably maybe 2 years out when it finally gets all pulled together. The Senior Center is meeting tomorrow. We've met, and now we're meeting again because we're going to have a joint meeting with Redwood Cove, and that's going to be interesting. I'm not quite sure what we're doing there. I've had several conversations about the Sutter Coast issue over the last week and a half, and I have lots of questions. The Historical Society is moving forward. They're not quite sure exactly about the start date of the repairs at the lighthouse, so everybody's kind of anxious about that. And I went to the IHSS. They have an association office now for the first time, partially in relationship to of them being able to get their forms and that kind of thing, so it offers computers to the employees, and they have a small support network. I've had lots of constituent talk to me about the power line issue and the state parks getting a permit so we can make sure that our power line doesn't fall, and that I've had 2 people now talk to me about a place on Harding Street where the kids exit on their bikes up into the hill and come back down, and they just enter onto the road, and they're very worried. So we may want to ask the road department to take a look at that. It's right by educational options, and we may just need to put a rock there or something to keep them from just plowing into the road before someone gets hurt. And other than that, I've also been reaching out this time of year because of the re-election, so I've been talking to lots of constituents, and it's a humbling and exciting time.
Thank you. Thank you, Supervisor McClure. Supervisor Hemmingsen.
Yes, thank you. It's been a while, but had a Klamath Management Zone Fisheries Coalition meeting, which is a group the counties belong to for quite a while. Curry County, Humboldt County, and Delmar County. And what they do is look at the fish return and escapements and a whole bunch of figures and stuff that mostly I get lost in. But they try to determine what the sports season could look like for the sports salmon fishermen. And then they send, they send a representative from both California and Oregon to the Pacific Fisheries Management Council to try to promote their ideas on how many fishing days that we should have in the sports fishing season, which certainly is a economic driver for both Delmar County and Humboldt County. So pretty important organization. They do a lot of good work on very little funding. It's been a little disorganized the last year and a half or so. We have always had our meetings at the harbor, and with all the issues that they've had with the tsunami, and Rich Young, the harbor master, has always been a kind of an integral part of that coalition, and has had to utilize his time doing other things, which we certainly understand. And he doesn't want to be excluded, but very difficult to get him included in a lot of the discussion. So we've had kind of a hard time getting the group together. It's been probably over a year since I personally have been able to go, because they continually change the meeting dates, and the last 2 meetings were changed at a pretty short notice, so I couldn't change my schedule soon enough to go. But I don't think they did it on purpose, but well, maybe they did. I don't know. Anyway, I think it's a great organization. I'm glad that the county participates, and there is some good representation. They're smart guys. I mean, they know the numbers of the jack returns and the all that stuff that is kind of mind-boggling to me, but pretty important stuff on the way they decide how they're going to set up the sports season. with the credit card fishery, which, you know, if you go past September, you're fishing on next year's allotment, so it's, I mean, it gets pretty intense sometimes, but they do a good job, I think, and hopefully we'll keep supporting them. Had a solid waste authority agenda review, which I don't know if any of you were at the last meeting, but it got a little lengthy, so I tried to streamline the agenda and tried to make it hopefully more efficient. We'll see how it goes. I think it's going to work well, so we'll see how that all comes out. Got an opportunity to meet with Stacy Lawson, who is running for the open seat for Congress. She seems like a nice enough gal, but like she's a politician and she's running for an office, and it's all good. She appears to be pro-business. She's started out in business herself, so I think it was a good discussion. I also got to have lunch with her a little later, and she kind of wanted to pick our brains on, you know, what the issues were in Delaware County. We tried to fill her in as best as possible, and then hopefully she will remember who we are. And last night or yesterday afternoon, had a local area formation commission meeting, which we approved the Crescent Fire Protection, Fort Dick Fire Department, and Smith River Fire Protection District's we increased some of those sphere of influences and approved their MSRs, municipal service reviews. All seem to be doing a pretty good job, or fine job, I should say, and we continue to support them. And that's about it for me.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor McNamer.
Yeah, I apologize for not having been at the last meeting. I did shut the closed session and had to leave because I had pneumonia and didn't want to pass it on, so.
Thank you.
Yeah. I did miss a few meetings, but was able to attend a meeting also with Stacy Lawson at a different time than Supervisor Hemmingsen. She only had about 15 minutes when I met with her, but I had a telephone interview with her prior to that, about 2 weeks prior to that. And yes, as Supervisor Hemmingsen said, she's very personable. Comes from an area very similar to Delaware County, so you know, maybe she can relate more to what used to be fishing logging industry, because that's the right area she came from, and her family is also involved in those type of businesses. I also attended the open house with the home health workers the other night too, and that you really get to see the other side of the story when you attend these things. You always hear about the patients and complaints, bad stories, which is what I did a few years ago. That's what got me interested in looking further into the in-home healthcare workers. In speaking with some of the in-home health workers at that meeting, I got to see their side of issues also that really need to be looked into. Both sides need to be protected and taken care of. I also attended the LAFCO meeting where we also elected new chair and vice chair. Chair Hemmingsen for LAFCO, and Kelly Shalong was elected as vice chair.
Yeah, and I want to thank you for declining the offer.
You're welcome. I also attended the chamber mixer at Frontier, and that was very nice. Nice spread food, very nice people, very nice gal that runs the office right now and running it by herself. So we were asked to be patient, and they had their little drawings and everything, and I won a Roku.
Nice.
So,
Well,
I even know what one is.
It's able to watch TV.
I wouldn't have known prior to my grandson living with me It's access to games on your, you hook it up to your television. Access to games, Netflix, movies, all kinds of, well, probably so much more than I'll ever learn. But I was thrilled that I got it so I could give my grandson back here. Also attended my first chamber board meeting, and it was like old home week down there. I love Gina. When I was on the board before was when Gina Zatola was hired as the director, and still some of the same people sitting on the board. I thought, boy, they really must enjoy doing what they do and sitting on that board. People like Chris Howard, Brent Hoskinson, I can't remember who else, might have been there prior. Linda King has been around in so many different things that she was also there, but it was nice going into being on a new committee again and being comfortable because you know so many people here. But that's one advantage of living in a small community. And I also attended Bayside Realty's 25-year celebration of being in business. And when I showed up, she said, "Oh, it's so nice you could come." And I said, "I wouldn't have missed this, Mimi. You forget how far back we go." She came to Mingtree Realty when I worked there. This was prior to, that was when she first got her real estate license. And then it went on from there to opening her own business. That was very nice. New little gal I'd never heard of did the catering. And I don't want to advertise for people, but it was wonderful food, real nice variety, and quite the spread. And I guess that's about it.
Okay.
I was reading my other notes, reminding myself about the legislative conference and the.
Okay, thank you. Well, mine are a little bit briefer. One of the issues I'm waiting for our update on, both Supervisor McClure and I sit on the RAC, Resource Advisory Committee, but and we awarded funds to go to different projects, and I've been waiting for, it's been almost 2 weeks for updates on those projects as to where they're at. There's a couple there I'm concerned that might get stalled out because of new requirements, and so I will pass on the word once I find out exactly where we're at. Additionally, also met with Stacy Lawson. This is the second time I've got a chance to meet with her. She does have a Harvard MBA, which is in the business. That's big. That's MBA from Harvard's pretty prestigious. And so far, I liked what she's had to say. She does come with it's Port Angeles, Washington, I think, is where she grew up. So anyway, we'll see what happens here. Had a meeting with the new manager at Walmart, Nick Ganella, with Gina Satola, Executive Director of the Chamber, and Chris Howard as a board member, in regards to getting their sponsorship for the fireworks show this summer, because one of the sponsors is pulling out. And seeing that Walmart is the biggest retail operation in the county, we thought that would be a very good community event for them to help sponsor. So we're going to have to see where it goes from here. Right now, I think Nick's got some very pro-community stuff. I know he joined one of the Rotary clubs and has been a lot more out in the public than the previous managers have. So that's encouraging, and I'm hoping that Walmart will step up to do one of the co-sponsor the event. So it is the biggest fireworks show. Just on a more sadder note, you saw in the paper today that and the board wants to pass the sympathies on to the Crockett family for the passing of Davy Crockett. It was quoted in the paper that he was one of the hardest working people you'd ever know, and I concur 100%. That guy, up until a week ago, was on the tractor, and he was 80, I believe 81. And it's always sad to see those people pass, pioneer in the community, and he'll be greatly missed. And other than that, that's it. So we're going to go on to, at this point, we're going to go on to our new line item, which is the County Administrative Officer's Report, which were lots of fanfare and spotlight and drum roll and the whole thing. So Go ahead, Jay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You might turn the
It'll be
mic.
relatively brief. In regards to some of the items that we're working on, we're going to cover what previously was capital projects, and Supervisor McClure had mentioned Battery Point. That is one of the biggest project that we're going to be kicking off here soon. Hope to have that all completed by the end of summer and have that structure taken care of for another several years, let's put it that way. Maybe not 150, but a few years. And hopefully if it does come in under budget, because there's always issues with older structures, but if it comes in under budget, we're going to be looking at some other options, maybe paint or some other specific items that may need attention too. So we'll be looking at that depending on how the project plays out. We received yesterday the draft of the travel management plan, and we'll be reviewing that recently, over the next week to 2 weeks. That is part of the coordination effort, so this is the point where we sit down and do our homework. Generally, at this point during the year, we're doing our mid-years, and we will be giving a report at the next board meeting, and I can touch on that under the budget section, but we're reviewing each one of the budgets line by line, and we'll go through those, and we've had our meetings. We may have one or two more meetings depending on how we sit, but we do have a couple of items that we're going to need to address, and perhaps some actions that the board will need to take mid-year and look at for significant issues for next year if the funding doesn't materialize. So in general terms, it's business as usual, and dealing with the issues that come up through our number of divisions that we have up in administration.
That's it?
That's it.
Wow, okay. It's a short, brief report. One thing that Mr. Serena and I are going to be doing this evening is we're attending at one of the first OES meetings, community meetings out in Gasky at the church at 7 o'clock. So those of you that live out there, or if you're listening online, we'd encourage you to attend. It should be our OES director, Cindy Henderson, is going to be leading the meeting. So at this point, and just a reminder too, are we going to get an update at some point on that coho salmon plan that I know staff is looking at right now?
We will speak with community development and see where we stand.
Okay. At this point, we'll go to consent agenda. Any public comment on consent agenda?
Move to approve.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any comments or questions from board members? Seeing none, Jeremy, could you please poll the vote?
Supervisor McClure?
Yes.
Supervisor Hemmingsen?
Yes.
Supervisor McNamer?
Yes.
Supervisor Finigan?
Yes.
Supervisor Sullivan?
Yes. Okay, moving on to budget transfers.
Move to approve budget transfers 02, 04, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 as delineated in agenda items 6 through 11.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any public comment on budget transfers? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board. Could you please poll the vote?
Supervisor McClure?
Yes.
Supervisor Hemmingsen?
Yes.
Supervisor McNamer?
Yes.
Supervisor Finigan?
Yes.
Supervisor Sullivan?
Yes. Okay, seeing how we still have 5 minutes before public comment, we'll go on to item 14 on the agenda.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I would like to go back to the budget transfers. I just had a question, but I was trying
so when we
to,
vote on-
I
Okay.
was trying to remember. I wrote notes on it, and it had to do with the Maiden Lane.
Tina?
Pardon me?
It's
The
Tina's going
pump
to be
station. It
Maiden
had to
Lane?
do with the Maiden Lane pump station. And the, gosh, it's been a couple nights since I read this, and I'm using my pneumonia as an excuse. I'm feeling a little dense on why I had my questions on this, other than the pump station is going to be replaced, so we won't have ongoing pumping every year by then, okay.
That's correct. And we had that unusual storm event. We had staff out there 24 hours a day
Right.
for 3 days. So
Yeah.
fortunately, the city was able to sub in and out with this. So, but that will be resolved.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Okay, going on to item 14. Jay?
As the board will recall, we've been working on Prop 40 Resources Bond Act per capita program monies for several years and have virtually come to the end of that process and have been in ongoing negotiations with the State Department of Parks and Recreation regarding the final payment. In the memo before you today, it gives a recommendation of approving a contract. That contract is not the same contract that the board entered into at the start of this project and has some deed restrictions on it. And they are 20-year deed restrictions regarding the parks. From the standpoint of having discussions with the state, which have been very one-sided in this sense, because the staff that we're talking to have their marching orders as to what they are allowed to do and not allowed to do. But essentially what had happened was the contracts we originally entered into had a 10-year restriction that basically required the recipient, the county, to operate these new facilities or new improved facilities for at least 10 years. The new contracts, which happened at the end of the bond period, after we had submitted our billing and had essentially met all of our requirements, have a more strenuous or more lengthy type of restriction, which is 20 years. All of the projects are done. All the projects were billed for. There was a date given by staff that is not reflected in the original contract of March of 2011 for submitting all of the billing. The end of the contract period was actually June 31, I think it was. We had met all those requirements. We had an inspection done. The inspector at that time said there were some outstanding issues. That gentleman retired and was soon replaced by another inspector who looked at all of the documentation, the letters from county council, the letters from us, and all of the documentation in his reporting and made the determination that we had complied with everything at that point, which meant that under the contract we had entered into, we had met our end of the deal. After that point, the bond money was reallocated in another budget year. And staff of State Parks and Recreation is saying that they have no option but to require that that new contract be entered into by the Board of Supervisors. And it's quite frustrating because we believe, and it was confirmed that we had met the requirements. Our biggest problem is that, of course, this is about $500,000 worth of reimbursement that the county has paid out, and we get paid in arrears. And we will need that money by the end of this fiscal year. And so at this point, looking at the pros and cons of entering into the contract, we have a recommendation before you to enter into that contract so that we can get paid that final amount. There are a couple of alternatives that you'll see in here. One would be to continue an effort to secure the final payment under the original contract, which at this point we have had county council involved, and we've been rebuffed on that end. The other part of this is that for every project that we submit, there's a 10% retention. So there's money left over to actually expend under this additional contract. Problem being is that if we enter into it in whatever facility we would then get approved for a project, there would be a 20-year deed restriction. And the main point or significant point of a deed restriction would be that there would be a bit of a cloud on the title if we were to ever finance or use those properties as collateral. There could be a cloud on the title. How bad a cloud? Probably not a significant one. But the other point of it is that we did comply with our contract, and now we're being asked to sign a separate contract. So the options are that we can sign the contract, the new contract as proposed by State Parks and Recreation. We can continue to argue our side of the case and see if we can be successful to utilize that first contract. And or also, if we sign the first contract, we can put in a project request and bring it before the board of the priority list and reinvest that money into another park or facility. Today, we're asking to enter into the new contract and get that money paid back.
Any questions?
No, it looks like we don't really have a choice. It's a little bit of blackmail, but at the same time, it's also an opportunity. You're going to get the reimbursement, number one, which is no debate to that. We have to have it. But then you got another $113,000 that we get to reinvest into this community. Well, actually, 10% of that, so there might be a little bit more. So closer to $120,000. How do we arm wrestle over that one?
Well,
I was thinking more boat
Isn't there
docks
a
down on the new
priority?
boat ramp in Klamath.
Isn't there a priority list established?
there was a priority list. We hit most of those that were financially within our means of the total allocation. But what we would do is come back to the board, if this contract's approved, come back to the board with some alternatives and see which ones the board would make for a final prioritization. And
Or we could be looking at a couple.
Yeah, unfortunately, $120,000, it sounds like a lot of money. It doesn't go a long way, but,
Not anymore.
hey, it's more infrastructure
Yeah.
for recreation.
And I think Supervisor Sullivan's point is made that it could be a couple or three of smaller projects that rehab something, because the $113,000 doesn't go so far.
Right.
We do have projects that we would obviously like to go after, but they are significant in price. So we would come up with a priority list of probably 2 or 3 projects and then see what
Have
the board wants to do.
signage to our park.
There's a lot of different ideas, and, you know, if we came through with the priority list and something's changed, we've been at this now for several years, so
Right.
if the priorities have changed, the board can give us direction, we can come back.
I agree that we probably don't have any choice, but what kind of justification do they use on changing the contract after the fact?
It has to do with the reallocation of the bond money, and it was a decision internally to, I'm sure by their counsel, to follow the policy of Parks and Recreation. Now, you know, my personal opinion is that it's a county park and the county needs to stay in control of those parks. Would the restriction for 20 years affect those parks? Probably not. They're going to be parks for a long time. And the amount of investment that this board has put into Florence Keller and Ruby Van Deventer and all these, Pike Field, is substantial. And they have shown a return on their investment already. So, you know, I don't see those parks going away anytime soon.
Okay. Any other questions?
I move that we secure the final payment through the new contract and develop a priority list for the remaining funds that come along with the new contract.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any public comment? Seeing no public comment, bring it back to the board. Yeah, I've the only issue, yes.
You got public.
Oh, I have public comment? Yeah. Come on up.
Dwayne Reichland, citizen. I was just going to mention, you talked about Florence Keller and Ruby and those. Many years ago, when we needed money to maintain the parks, we actually got all of our local groups together and did a thinning project, and Florence Keller came up with some money that way also.
Yeah, thanks.
Any other public comments? It is frustrating that the rules changed after we met all the qualifications, and I don't like to put restrictions on 20 years in the future on a piece of property that really the state shouldn't be putting restrictions on that long. But Jeremy, could you please poll the vote?
Supervisor McNamer?
Yes.
Supervisor McClure?
Yes.
Supervisor Hemmingsen?
Yes.
Supervisor Finnegan?
Yes.
Supervisor Sullivan?
Yes. Okay, so we're going to move on to a timed item that was at 10:35, which is our public comment period. Any public comment? Members of the public may address the board on matters which are within the jurisdiction of the board. If you are addressing the board regarding a matter listed on the agenda, you may be asked to hold your comments until the board takes up that matter. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. Okay, seeing no public comment. Wow, somebody's on vacation for a while, I guess. That's why we don't have any public comment this morning. So we'll go on to our other timed item, which is at 10:40. Presentation by Eugene Suxi of Sutter Coast Hospital, the CEO, regarding consolidation of the Sutter Coast Hospital into the West Bay region of Sutter Health with an overview of upcoming changes in governance and operating structure. Mr. Suxi.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hopefully, I've attempted to distribute a copy of my text and my comments for your review. That being said, I may begin.
You might have to summarize it because didn't really have a chance to read it. I don't think any of the other board members did, so you good.
To begin, let me just preface it that my comments here, I was requested by our Board of Trustees to provide this update to the Board of Commissioners. And I will preface it by stating that the economics of healthcare are tough, and they're becoming tougher. The impact of our nation's financial crisis is being felt at all levels. Costs continue to rise, and consumers are being asked to pay more and more for their care. Both consumers and insurers have higher expectations for accessible, affordable, and high-quality care, and they're asking for more detailed information regarding cost and outcomes. At the same time, government reimbursement continues to shrink, and access to capital is increasingly limited. Decreasing payments and higher cost means that we must make difficult decisions about the cost structure of healthcare without compromising care. The U.S. healthcare system will have to get better, faster, and cheaper, and do it with fewer resources. Sutter Health leadership has recognized that if we are to continue to provide the highest possible quality care at an affordable price, we must change. We must transition from what we have been, a group of hospitals and physician organizations that share a common mission but plan and execute without collaboration, to a fully integrated, high-value system with uniform quality. In 2009, Sutter Health organized their almost 50 separate affiliates and business units into 5 regions to help make our healthcare system more flexible and efficient for our patients through better coordination and collaboration with less duplication and less variation. The 5 regions promote collaboration across a network so patients receive the highest quality and value. While originally excluded from the regionalization process due to geography and the question of which regional alignment would best benefit Sutter Coast, the time has arrived for Sutter Coast to pursue regionalization. In November of 2011, the Sutter Coast Board of Trustees voted to embrace the transition from a single, standalone affiliate to become a member of the West Bay region of Sutter Health. The transition is expected to be complete sometime before the end of 2012, and is actually targeted to hopefully for August. The West Bay region of Sutter Health is composed of 2 corporations, Sutter West Bay Hospitals and Sutter West Bay Medical Foundation. California Pacific Medical Center, St. Luke's Hospital, Novato Community Hospital, Sutter Medical Center Santa Rosa, and Sutter Lakeside Hospital were merged to form Sutter West Bay Hospitals. The Pacific Foundation at California Pacific Medical Center and Sutter Medical Foundation North Bay were merged to form Sutter West Bay Medical Foundation. Each corporation has its own board of directors. Regionalization means the Sutter Coast will be integrated into the ownership and governance structures of the Sutter West Bay Hospitals and their board of directors. That board of directors is composed of members from affiliate community advisory boards. When regionalization is complete, the Sutter Coast Hospital Board of Trustees will be dissolved and replaced by a local community advisory board. Sutter Coast will have members of the current Board of Trustees transition to both the Community Advisory Board and the Sutter West Bay Hospital's Board of Directors. However, the exact number of representatives from any given affiliate is not specified in the region's bylaws. Therefore, the exact number of total members and the total number of members from the Sutter Coast Advisory Board on the Board of Directors is uncertain at this time. The local medical staff will have a connection to the Sutter West Bay Hospital's Board of Directors through the affiliate Chief of Staff. The Chief of Staff from each affiliate in the region sits on a council that has direct access to the Board of Directors. Decisions regarding the affiliate's medical staff, including medical staff privileging, will remain at the affiliate level. This change is significant, and with significant change comes uncertainty and concern. But some things are certain. It is certain that the region exists to support the affiliates. The affiliates will define their aspirations, needs, and definitions of success. If the region is successful, it is certain that it will be because the affiliates are successful and because they are supporting each other and the region as a whole. All affiliates are expected to be trusted and helpful partners to each other. It is certain that each affiliate is an important part of the team. It is certain that each affiliate must succeed and each affiliate must exceed patient expectations. The West Bay region of Sutter Health functions as a team and is not driven by a single affiliate. Hospitals, medical foundations, and private practices can all work together as an integrated delivery system, sharing best practices and delivering better value to our patients. The regional structures offer a full continuum of care across the lifespan, from prenatal care to end-of-life care, with affiliate leadership and physicians having a strong voice in the planning, implementation, and operation of services. Regionalization preserves a strong role and voice for our community-based physician organizations and hospitals. Sutter Health, the West Bay region, and Sutter Coast Hospital remain driven by an unwavering commitment to caring for and about our patients in the communities we serve. But fulfilling this commitment requires an entirely new leadership approach that will allow us to reach the highest level of responsiveness, flexibility, and efficiency. To that end, Sutter Health Regional Governance and Management Model is designed to more effectively align physicians and hospitals, share best practices, and deliver the highest possible quality care to our patients at an affordable price. Regionalization will help our quality, service, prices, and outcomes to achieve superior levels of performance. Care and resources can be coordinated across the region with capital investment and physician strategies fully aligned. Regionalization is necessary if we are to continue to provide value to our communities. We must reduce our costs and improve our efficiency in order to respond to the challenges ahead. It is a complex process, and we will undoubtedly face challenges, but each challenge will be an opportunity to get better at providing sustainable, high-quality care. While ownership and governance may be regionalized, care is local. Our community will still have a voice through the Community Advisory Board. Our community can have a more dependable supply of excellent physicians working as strong partners, whether foundation-based or practicing independently. Leadership at Sutter Coast will have increased access to resources and competencies that we could not access on our own. Our employees will benefit from greater access to helpful colleagues and significant reduction in the sense of geographic isolation. Some have expressed concerns that regionalization will eliminate local input and that the region will be dominated by larger affiliates. These are valid concerns shared by other affiliates when the regionalization process was initiated in 2009. Prior to our November 2011 vote, the Sutter Coast Board contacted the administrative and advisory board leadership at Sutter Lakeside Hospital, a similarly sized Sutter affiliate located in Lakeport, California, to discuss their experience with regionalization. The Lakeside leaders stated that outcomes had been favorable without the loss of local input. The chair of the Lakeside Community Advisory Board also sits on the West Bay Region Board and reported that local input regarding service, quality, and community benefit activities actually improved. They also noted that with regionalization, support services and capital funding are now distributed through the regions. Simply put, if an affiliate is not plugged into a region, support services cannot be efficiently obtained and cannot be obtained efficiently and cost effectively, and some may not be able to be obtained at all. In conclusion, the Board of Trustees of Sutter Coast Hospital believes that joining the West Bay region of Sutter Health is in the best interest of Sutter Coast Hospital and the communities we serve. I share that belief wholeheartedly. It is essential that we continue to have access to the support services, technical and clinical expertise, and financial strength available within Sutter Health, and those resources are best accessed through Sutter Health's regional structure. As we progress towards integration into the West Bay region, I will continue to share our progress. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Are you up for questions now? Or let's, I guess we'll go to public comment now at this point. Go ahead. Any public comment on this? Yeah, Dwayne, come on up.
Of the newly appointed Delaware County Healthcare District member, I also have the distinct privilege of being the oldest Delaware County Health Care member. So what I have here is a copy of the original lease agreement, and I came on the board 1996. This document was actually signed in 85, or I said 96, 80. I came on board in 86. This document was signed in 85. Of course, there's a stack of addendums and what have you. But in this document, it states in there, in the opening pages, that most of the folks that control the hospital will be Delaware County residents. Our concern, and certainly we've had a wonderful relationship over the years with Sutter, and we have absolutely no complaints on any of the way that they've handled their business in Delaware County. The only concern that we have is that we will be losing some of the structure that we have had for many, many years in this. I know Eugene is trying to tell us that those things will not impact the quality of service or how Sutter is looked or what happens. But we all know that the farther control moves away from Delaware County, basically the less control we have on things that happen in Delaware County. So I think what we're looking for as a board is better assured representation from this community on either their board of directors or know exactly what the subcommittee's responsibilities will be and what their authority will be more than anything else. So, thank you.
Thanks, Dwayne. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing no public comment, I'm going to bring it back to the board. Supervisor McClure, I know you're itching to get at the mic.
I've got quite a few, and probably, Eugene, you'd like to be back at the mic.
Yeah, there's some questions from the board member. If you want to come back up to the mic.
Ask you some questions. This board prides itself in trying to create partnerships and trying to make decisions through a cooperative and coordinated effort of when things are going to change. And when I see that Sutter, in fact, through my discussions, I've found out people refer to it as Mother Sutter, or the mothership of Sutter. That back in 2009, when these discussions started happening, I question why there wasn't a public dialogue going on at that time. And I find that unfortunate, but we can't turn back time. And then with the 2011 decision, again, we had no community involvement, because I think that the community was very proud of our old seaside hospital, recognized the fact that we couldn't carry the burden alone, recognized the fact that Sutter would be a good partner for this community, and thought we had protections in relationship to oversight, with not only program oversight but fiduciary oversight in things that were happening within the system. Now we get information that this is, the train has left the station, and we now have a 6-month window, and it doesn't appear that there's been much negotiation as to what the relationship is going to look like, other than we already have bylaws, and the bylaws don't guarantee you get a place on the board. Therefore, we'll treat you right. I've been on enough boards and commissions that I know what advisory boards do, and they don't have any pushback. And so when I see that Lake said that they had a fairly good outcome, one of the keys I think that they had a fairly good outcome was they have a position on the board. And it's my understanding that the discussion that was coming from Mother Sutter when this regional discussion was happening was that this board was going to have 2 positions on the board, and the chief of staff was going to be on the, what do you call it, the council?
Right.
Because council has only access. Council does not have ability to do decision-making. So those are my big issues. I think that regionalization is going to happen. I mean, I get that part about the finances and all of that. But I'm hoping that Mother Sutter will amend these bylaws, guarantee us our 2 spots that were part of that vote back in 2011, which apparently in the same meeting, the vote happened, people understood there were going to be 2 positions. The vote happened, and then the Sutter representative said, oh no, we can't guarantee that. So to me, there's an easy fix to this, because when I see my community healthcare district with red flags over this, and when I see some of the physicians who have been practicing medicine in this county for longer than it's been Sutter raise a red flag, I feel that I need, as a member of the Board of Supervisors, to say I too see a red flag, and would urge Sutter to enter into public dialogue with the Board of Supervisors, the Healthcare District, and the Sutter Board, and let's see how we can amend those bylaws and have an orderly entrance into this regionalization, rather than being told, well, you're the last one standing, you in Hawaii, so you either do or don't. You know, and there's enough implied hammers, you know, if you don't do this, we're not going to be able to do capital improvements, and I get it. But I hope that you're here to offer dialogue, and you're here to say, let's fix this. And, you know, when you talk about being a team, the team starts locally. And we kind of, I feel that the team spirit was, you know, we're the Bush League, kind of, and the big mothership made the decision, and we need to go along to get along, or I don't know what the or is. I mean, we know we're going to be regionalized, but we just want to be able to guarantee, because this community, you know, years ago, we had the Humboldt Del Norte Health Department. Not a good fix. I mean, we do know we can point to things historically where we join a region and we're part of the Humboldt, Mendocino, you know, yada, yada, yada organization, and we become the runt of the litter really quick. Right. And we don't want to be the runt of the litter. So I'm pleading that you listen to the healthcare district, you listen to the docs that are saying we need representation, and hopefully you listen to me, and hopefully my colleagues want you to listen to us also.
Noted.
Supervisor Finigan.
Along the same lines, Eugene, thank you for the presentation. I've had conversations both through email and voice with a few of the docs. And the concern here is really regionalization versus representation. I think that's the theme you're going to hear here. Regionalization is an obvious sign of the times, and it needs to be done along with the idea of partnerships in mind and economies of scale. However, representation has to be there. Advisory boards, I sit on some. I know they can be dynamic, but only as dynamic as the loudest mouth on the board, and it still doesn't guarantee you a seat. It guarantees you a seat in the back row, but it doesn't give you a vote at the dais. So there needs to be representation on the regional board, period. And I think that's what I would like this board to take a position at. I see that play out in my daily work on the boards that I sit on, and the goings-on in Sacramento and in D.C. And I've adopted a new philosophy that I sort of like, I stole from somebody else, and it's, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And we need formal representation, period.
Supervisor Hemmingsen.
I just would like to echo what both Supervisor McClure and Finigan have said, and, you know, it's really fortunate that we got you to stand up to the mic and you haven't got to respond to a question yet, but
I don't think there's been any questions. No, I think it's been our opinion.
Yeah, and I don't mean to make light of that, because it is a very important issue that the representation, that Del Norte County have representation. We've always had a good working relationship with Sutter Coast Hospital, as Gerry's nodding his head. Mental health, social services, the county itself has always had a great relationship, and we don't want that to change. And for that not to change, we have to be at the table, and we have to have some representation. So I agree with that, but I do have some questions. In what you were saying here, you mentioned affordability and cheaper. Does this regionalization mean that they're going to actually roll back some prices? It's going to be less expensive to go to the hospital?
Hopefully, yes.
Surely, yes.
You know, one of the reasons that regionalization was pursued to begin with was to eliminate redundant structures within the system. Healthcare is expensive. We know that. And as consumers are asked to pay more, insurance reimbursement goes away, we have an obligation to take a look at every operations opportunity we have to be more efficient, save money there, so that we don't have to cut something at the bedside. And yes, there is an initiative for us to take a look at our rates and make our rates more affordable for consumers, because consumers are going to have to pay more of the freight. So yeah, we are hoping to be able to change that.
Great. Supervisor McNamer.
I also sit on a couple of regional boards, and I agree with, I think it was Supervisor McClure said that we end up the runt of the pack. And it does show out of just 3 counties, I don't want to mention what board I'm on, but we get 1 meeting here a year, 1 meeting in the 2nd county, and all the rest are in the largest county each year. So we do kind of get the short end of the stick a lot of times. And I have a question that I don't know if this is part of what you can address or not. My biggest complaint with the hospital is when they hire their physicians group, the in-hospital physicians, emergency room physicians, I think they're all the same group, is they are not a preferred provider.
No, that's actually changed.
When did it change?
December, a year ago in December. Yeah, so one of the things we did have.
So hospital bills should be.
Yeah, the physician group in the emergency room, that is by contract.
Yes.
And originally, when that was set up, we did all the billing for the hospital group as well as for the hospital. Then they wanted to take that billing back, and not all the contracts that Sutter Coast had did the physicians group pick up. However, particularly Blue Cross, which is a large insurer in this area, the prison, the state parks, the national parks, they're all some version of a Blue Cross contract. And we worked with that group to have them accept the Blue Cross contract, and that was a little bit over a year ago. They actually just renewed it for a 2nd time.
But now you said the Blue Cross.
Right.
Does that mean they're going to accept all the insurances as preferred, to be preferred providers? Say the county employees have Delta insurance.
Well, it all depends because, frankly, in order to be preferred, that means somebody has got to be unpreferred. And to be in that panel, some folks by definition have to be excluded. So I can't guarantee that they'll accept every preferred provider contract out there. Our goal is to align them with the preferred provider contracts that the hospital has. We want them to be part of those contracts as well.
And do you know how long that negotiation would take to figure out whether or not Delta was going to be included in that?
I don't know. I'm not familiar with that particular plan, or if the emergency group has any contact with that group, or they've attempted to be on that panel. But I can look into that.
Well, Morgan Hill is notorious. They're notorious for how they bill people. And we know that statewide. Especially Mother Sutter knows that statewide. I mean, so it's an interesting, I understand all of the nuances, but
Just remember that Mother Sutter is meant in, it's a loving term.
That's like stepmom. At one point, it's my understanding, as an example of a local board, Sutter here was going to do away with the OBGYN.
I don't know about that. That precedes me, and I don't think there was ever a point that the hospital was going to do away with it.
And then, can you do a little bit of explanation about the discussion that Sutter's also having about becoming a 25-bed hospital?
Yeah.
And what's that called? It's a specific...
Critical access.
Yes, thank you.
Critical access designation is designed for remote rural hospitals. Curry General Hospital in Gold Beach is a critical access hospital. So there's specific requirements you have to meet. You have to be 25 miles or more away from another provider. You have to be isolated. And because of that and your relatively small scale, there is a program called the Critical Access Programs that allows those facilities to be reimbursed on a cost percentage at 104% of their operating cost for allowable costs. For example, marketing costs aren't an allowable cost, nursing salaries are. So it has to be related to the, the core operation of the hospital enterprise. Now, historically, Sutter Coast has maintained an average daily census above 25. We've actually been too large to be a critical access hospital because we operate above that 25-bed threshold. There are some size restrictions that go with that. Currently, Sutter Coast has a designation. We're a sole community provider under 50 beds. And so we get some reimbursement enhancements because of those designations. And we'll explore critical access. I think the thing you want to be careful about in terms of those restrictions, it has to make sense in terms of the needs of the community operationally. And if you can operate within that scope and meet the needs, then it does provide some economic advantages for that designation. And we will probably be exploring that as we move forward. Ideally, frankly, my goal would be for us to provide some service enhancements, build up some physician capacity, and always be operating above 25, so the point is moot. But should we have population decreases, things like that, as we hit a point where our average daily census would be anticipated to be below 25, we would look at that for the economics of how we would be reimbursed. And for small hospitals, the hospital I came to before Sutter Coast was a critical access hospital. And it's very advantageous for small hospitals that wouldn't be able to keep their doors open with the average daily census that might be single digit, for example. It originally was designed for hospitals that had an average daily census of 12 or less. So it is something we'll look at. The algebra of whether or not it makes sense, that's kind of dynamic, and it isn't determined that it makes sense for Sutter Coast. But we'll look at it.
And I guess then that's case in point as to why we need local representatives on that board.
Yeah.
Because I know that our local Easter Seals, they don't call themselves Easter Seal anymore.
Community Assistance League.
The Community Assistance League works really, really hard to assist families that if their loved one needs to get to Reading or needs to get to San Francisco or needs to get to Humboldt County even. And if we become a critical care place, I understand that that's what it does, is it gets people to a point that they can go home, but many times so they can get to a point to get to another hospital, which puts a burden on our community that needs to be an analysis.
Yeah.
And so, again, that's why we need the voice.
And I would concur with all my fellow board members on this. And, well, first of all, thank you for coming to make the presentation to the board. Sometimes we get notice way after the fact. It's nice to get a little bit advance notice on this. And we do appreciate, I know Sutter's been very actively about doing that last connection on the broadband for redundancy, and I know you guys have been active in that. And we do appreciate that's one of our major infrastructure issues, as well as being one of the major employers in the area. And I think sometimes, you and I have discussed this before, people really don't know the magnitude of the payroll at Sutter Coast. It's pretty large. But I understand business. I've come from the business side of stuff, but I got a really bad feeling about this regionalization on the structure you guys have set up right now and the direction it's going. I think we do have to have a guaranteed positions on that board. Otherwise, we will be, and I, like other board members, sit on advisory councils. It's all talk, and there is no implementation. There is no authority for that advisory council, hence the name advisory. That's my big concern, is that we will, we're finding it out and other things. When we get lumped together in bigger counties, in bigger areas, a lot of times, unless we go fight for it, we get forgotten in the process. So that would be the real big issue for me, and I think for most of the board, is having some kind of guaranteed position on that board. And it's funny, Supervisor McClure said the thing right out of the gate is the chair of Lakeside Community Advisory Board also sits on the West Bay Region Board, spoke very highly favorable, because he sits on the region board. That would be he's basically guaranteed input. So if you can relay that to, the mothership, or, positively speaking, Mother Sutter, we would really encourage Sutter to to amend this the way it is and give us a guaranteed spot on it, or at least the two that we talked about.
Yeah, and I want to acknowledge that there's a difference between saying we're not guaranteed a specific number of slots and by default they're saying we won't have one. Because that's never, yes, I realize that's the fear if you say no affiliate is guaranteed a specific number of slots. The default is in, well, that means we could be without one at all. And that's certainly not the case. So the idea, your comment about that it was talking about 2 and then a switch, they said, sure, 2 is fine, but they also put in the caveat, though, but I want to remind you that no affiliate is given any particular guarantee. So I foresee that we will get at least 2 slots. I do foresee that we will have leadership from our advisory board who also sits on the regional board. And the regional board actually has a higher percentage of physicians on it than any of the fiduciary boards for the facilities did before. About 1/3 of the total composition of it's about 30. And about 1/3 of them are physicians. So that medical staff input is the board. The council is of the chiefs of staff. So you might have representation from the chief of staff and another physician who's also on the board. So you can have multiple levels of input from the medical staff to the board decision-making process. Although I will duly note, and I will carry the banner about that we want to be sure we have Sutter Coast representation on the regional board. I will make sure that my superiors hear that message.
Is the regional board a public board? I mean, do you have any kind of, do you have any kind of public responsibility?
No. No, in terms of were we subject to Public Meeting Act and those kinds of things, no.
What's the process of getting on that board?
Well, first of all, it starts from the Community Advisory Board, and then you kind of poll and nominate, and it's the same process for joining the current Sutter Coast Board. You identify potential candidates, discuss that with them. There is a screening process that has to happen, obviously, do a background check, those kinds of things. And interested parties are screened for the number of available open positions.
I know it was said on the bylaws don't allow for that to happen, but it's also a perfect opportunity to
Amend the bylaws.
Well, exactly. You rewrite them, amend them, do whatever has to be done. Just before you walk through the door of regionalization, it's a perfect opportunity for it. So what I would ask is that this board, we give direction to have a letter crafted. That while we appreciate regionalization and we very much appreciate the partnership and relationship we've had with Sutter in this community, through the emergency care, through the hospital, through the clinic, that we ask for representation on that regional board, and aside from the advisory, and whether we want to say at least 2 or a specific amount. And I don't know who's going to craft that letter, whether it's going to be Jay in conjunction with the healthcare district, and maybe the healthcare district can write, if they feel comfortable, a letter along that lines as well. I think we need to weigh in. I know that everybody's well-intentioned here and means to do well, and I'm sure that if we did nothing, we may end up with 3 slots on the board for the first 6 months.
Be careful not to lowball it.
Yeah. So, the bottom line is that goes away. It only has as much clout as somebody wants to give you, unless it's in writing that you have that seat at the table, and we need to have that in writing.
Makes for good partnership.
Yeah, and not to, you've been a great partner in the community, but Sutter Coast could change your position over. You're going to retire at some point, and the new person coming in that role may not have the same warm, fuzzy feeling and working well with the community. So we want to, that's why I think we need to it's happened, and I think part of the reason the board's speaking this way, it's happened to us before. And so not specifically with Sutter, but with other agencies and representations where we, unless we have some guarantees in it, and Golden Gate Bridge District's a perfect example, unless we have a guarantee, we have a spot on that board, the population doesn't get us to a point where we have a lot to say. So
I feel like we represent the entire county, so we should have a voice on that to speak for our county.
Somebody from our county. So we're going to send a letter And next steps then say, when would we expect a response back from Sutter, or when would we expect a tabling of someone to sit and talk?
Or dialogue to let it go to?
I don't know. I think a lot depends upon when the letter is received. I would expect that Sutter's generally pretty good about responding to those things, so I expect it would be within a reasonable time frame. But
So we send it to you, to Mothership, and to the regional?
I would recommend what you do is you send it to me. You should probably CC Andy as the chairman of our Board of Trustees. And I think if you started there,
You'll get the message out.
we'll get the message out. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Then I have one question of Dwayne now.
Okay, thanks, Eugene.
Thank you.
So whenever I'm working on a project, I like to keep all options open and on the table. Do you have legal counsel taking a look at that original contract that said Sutter would be here in operation with local representation?
We do not have yet. This came up as a side issue.
So do you anticipate that that's going to be
That's
researched?
correct. In fact, this was kind of my fact-finding thing today. I was not on the board when Eugene gave his presentation to the board, so this was a twofold thing, one for me to report back to the board and one for me to get up to speed on what's going on.
And then see what the amendments say as far as the partnership.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Dwayne. Andy? Yeah.
Members of the board, I'm Andy Ringgold. I'm current chair of the Board of Trustees, and I just wanted to, from our perspective, just add a couple items to Eugene's. This has been a real struggle for the board. We have a responsibility to the community. We are representatives of the community, and I've been on the board. This is my 10th year and 4th year as chair, and I can sit here and guarantee you that every member of the board is struggling, first with the decision, and second of all with the implementation and the very questions that you're asking. Part of what I'm doing now is leading an effort to get out of the gate first and define the role of this new advisory board, and as much as we can really tailor that to some of the concerns you're expressing. The board will not have the same role as the current board, but we think it's very, very important to continue having that strong local input into the management of the hospital, but also to make sure that we have representation on that regional board. The picture of the runt of the litter, right now we're the runt of a litter of 20-some or 30 hospitals. We may not be the same species of animal. We're that far separated. And this move to regionalization at least reduces the size of the litter. And in my view, and I can speak for the board, I think we will by far get much more out of regionalization than we will contribute to it. I mean, it can only benefit the hospital by going this direction. And our responsibility, as I said, is to the community and to look strategically down the road at where things are going and do what is best for the hospital and for the community. And those two are tied together intrinsically. And we're doing the absolute best we can. But our concerns, you've voiced a lot of them, and we'll keep in touch, and we'll get there.
Great. Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Eugene. Okay, any other comments from board members? And so we have direction for staff to, we'll take a 3-minute break here.
Hey, Andy.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to go into item 15. Consider the nomination of Richard P. Cotta, Jr., attorney at law, as submitted by the remaining public defenders as a replacement attorney for Robert Drossel. And I do need to recuse myself. Supervisor McNamer, would you lead this part of the meeting?
Okay. Jay, do you have
The Board of Supervisors is relatively familiar with the process of the PD contract for the public defenders. They will come forward with a nomination of a replacement attorney anytime they have a resignation. Mr. Drossel has been in place for a couple of years now and is looking to step down, and the nomination from the PDs is Richard P. Cotta, Jr., and they are in the audience, and he can introduce himself, but at this point, the recommendation is to accept the nomination and to approve the Second Amendment to the agreement, replacing Robert Drossel with Richard P. Cotta, Jr., and then doing the reassignment, completing the paperwork.
Okay. Do we have any?
Any questions?
Introduce him. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, board members, Mr. Cotta, why don't you please come up? I'm Bob Drossel, current public defender on contract with Del Norte County. I'd like to introduce Richard Cotta. He has much experience and skills that'll benefit the public defender contract, and he'll be an asset to our community, I'm sure. If any questions, we'd be glad to answer them.
Maybe you can just tell us
Sure.
a little bit about yourself.
Well, ma'am, good morning, first of all. Good morning. I've been an attorney at law since I was 3 years old. My father was a lawyer before me, and the way he raised me, I was completely corrupted before I had a choice about it. And I've been a member of the bar since 1985, I believe, over 25 years now. Most of my time as a lawyer has been spent in the criminal law, and
Good.
I quit counting years ago, but I estimate I've conducted well over 200 matters at trial to verdict, most of them felonies, virtually every kind of case you could imagine. I take my duties as defense counsel seriously. I take my duties as an officer of the court seriously. I like to be ready. And I take my anticipated duties to this board and the good people of Del Norte County seriously. They expect me to discharge my duties within the meaning of Strickland versus Washington and its progeny. And they also expect me to understand the competing priorities that are often presented in pursuing my duties as a criminal defense attorney. So I'm ready to start. It's sometimes challenging, but I think I've had many years of experience learning how to balance those issues. I'm not isolated. There are many other people in the justice system, particularly our local judges, to whom an attorney can turn for assistance when assistance is needed. So if you have any other questions, I'll be happy to try and answer them. Right now, and most recently, I've been practicing and living in the county of Modoc, which is kind of the other bookend. This is your bookend. You are the most northwesterly county in California, and of course Modoc is the most northeasterly. So living in a small rural community that's somewhat isolated is something that I've grown somewhat accustomed to. Well, I did notice that you have a Walmart here.
Yes.
We don't have one of those, and in fact you have many amenities here in Crescent City that we only dream about in Alturas. The Pacific Ocean is one of them, but you know, I'm looking forward very much to, I've never lived in this part of the state, but I will tell you that once you've lived in the sagebrush and the junipers, it does kind of get into your system.
Yes,
so.
it does.
So welcome aboard.
Thank you. Thank you
Well,
very
I
much.
don't know if you're married or not, but that's nice to know that you come from such a small community that she's used to no malls.
I have a significant other, and it was actually my significant other which prompted me to explore what other opportunities may exist for myself, and that's how I found the announcement that Del Norte was looking for a contract defender, so.
And you have no conflicts of interest. You're going to have a case.
Yes.
This is a good thing for the county, not
don't run him off.
necessarily a good thing for me, because all the conflicts will find their way to my desk, yes.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Anything else I can help you with this morning?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I would move that we accept Mr. Cotta as the replacement attorney and also approve the Second Amendment to the agreement 2010-176.
Second.
I have a motion and 2 seconds. Do we have any public comment on this item? Hearing none. Thank you. Jeremy, would you poll the vote, please?
Supervisor McClure?
Yes.
Supervisor Hemmingsen?
Yes.
Supervisor Finigan?
Yes.
Supervisor McNamer?
Yes.
And correct pronunciation of your last name?
Cotta.
Oh.
Mr. Cotta?
Welcome back, Mr. Cotta.
All right. And I recuse myself because I do have a business relationship with some of the other public defenders, so I can't vote or even comment on the contract. So, but congratulations. Moving on to item 16, review any make any necessary amendments and adopt the 2012 Del Norte County Legislative Platform as requested by the County Administrative Officer. So we talked about this last time, and Jay, as well as our federal advocate, has provided some points. I think it is important for any of us that do get out, as well as RCRC and CSAC, to know where the county is coming from.
It is an important document, and a lot of our goals and policies have not changed over a number of years. You know, obviously, as the board has progressed with advocacy, you'll see in here a significant federal agenda, and I think that's very appropriate in the sense that, you know, you have to work on both levels of government, or all 3 levels of government, but having somebody in Washington, D.C. on top of these issues is extremely important to Del Norte County. And Peterson Consulting also included some items on the state level. They do somewhat overlap because they will have contact with our congressman too. So I think the document covers well all of the issues, or many of the issues that have come up over the years. It reflects the board's desires and the county's goals, and protects the county in the sense that there's a document that all of our department heads, all of our advocates, and all of our groups can utilize when they need it, and speed up the process of understanding where Del Norte County is coming from legislatively.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I do have and just tell me if I'm off base here, but the support for funding for airport runway expansion, I'm thinking that maybe we need to focus that more now on the terminal and the runway safety area project, rather than, you know, maybe runway expansion is going to be something that we're looking at down the road.
I saw Mr. Bernard here a little earlier. I can get some wording from him.
Yeah,
and
but I think we need to focus that on the projects that we have at hand, rather than something that's not.
We could reference the airport improvement projects.
Yeah.
The adopted priority list that we have out there at the airport.
Yeah, I'd like to see that rather than having it working on something that we're really not working on right at the moment.
Right, because if there is expansion, it'll be because it's a requirement of the type of
exactly
plane, you know, that we have out there, and it'll be mandated, so it'll take care of itself. But right now, I think you're exactly right. The runway safety area,
and the terminal project.
Terminal project, exactly.
Mr. Chair.
ILS.
Yes. Supervisor McNamer.
I also had a question. I was just reminded going through all this of some of the concerns that we've had for years, and one of them is the in lieu of property taxes from Fish and Game. Where are we at with that? Are we ever going to?
We continue to, through a couple of different avenues, make contact with legislators. The most recently, I've spoke with Supervisor Finigan, and I've also spoken with Peterson Consulting. to keep the pressure on. It is legally mandated funds that, as the Department of Fish and Game staff have indicated, are not appropriated. The wording in the law is not appropriated, it is allocated. Appropriation and allocation are significantly different when you're talking about how those funds are dispersed. It's a decision inside the government, and that decision has not been made to pay those in lieu fees since 2003. And so we've continued, right, we've continued to talk with their staff.
What's the bill up to?
It's a little over $200,000 now, I believe.
I thought it was closer to 300,000.
And for anybody listening, that is, the in lieu fees are for the creation of the wildlife area. They're associated with properties that have been taken off the tax rolls associated with the wildlife area. And there is PILT, which is the federal level, and it's primarily BLM land, and that's paid on an annual basis through the but in the state level, they have not appropriated or allocated those. How about that? So we continue to work on those continually. If there's somebody that will listen, and we can throw that out. We work with other counties. We've talked with the CAO groups because there are numerous counties in the same boat. Glenn County went on a little bit more litigious note. I don't know if they made it very far, but haven't talked to them lately.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions from
I just want to.
supervisors? Yes.
I just want to be on record with the, let me see which page it is. Page 2 of the Part 3 specific legislative plan that identifies seeking the legislation for the donation or acquisition of land by private entities without county participation in the process, that we're going to try to get that to be made illegal. And I am still of the same position that it is a property rights issue, and that if I own land and I find someone to buy the land, even if it be the federal government, the state government, or a tribal government, I get to sell it if it's my land. And so I find that we are pushing onto private property rights issues, and I just want to be noted that I support that, but I'm not going to work hard on that one. And the same with the timber tax, because it's vague enough for me to read where it says be used for other than harvesting and growing of timber. And I know that we have lots of people in our community that live on their TPZ land, and they have a house there, and they haven't really planned on harvesting their trees, but it's been in TPZ because they've left that option open, but they actually live there because they can have one house for every 20 acres. So I think it's imperative that before we ask to change a law that could affect our neighbors negatively, we need to look at what their property, what they're using it as, because it's vague when it says used for other than harvesting or growing timber. So those are the only two that I'm kind of like, makes me a little nervous.
You know, as far as the TPZ goes, people are told right up front that it takes a conditional use permit to get residential property. The primary use of that property is not for residential.
But they're allowed one house per 20.
Right.
And there's no requirement as to when, like it doesn't say that their trees have to reach 18 inches in diameter and they must thin,
No.
or it has none of that there.
But the primary use is production of timber, period.
Right, but
And I think what this deals with is once the primary use of that land is not for the production of timber, then we need to work about being compensated for that.
And they should be paying the same as everyone else, though.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about
I think
people squeezing in there under.
2/3 of Big Flat is probably TPZ.
I think it's PO. I'm not sure. But regardless, I also, speaking to what you talked about, the acquisition of land and public entities, sure. Almost as much property rights as the next guy. I think what we're talking about is the negative implication it has to our tax base unless it's significantly or sufficiently mitigated. You want to give your property to the government, they want to pay for it, sure, but they also have to deal with our tax base. And I think is what it talks about in there is that there needs to be a process. When the donation or acquisition of land by public entities without county participation in the process, and provide for the necessary operational funding. So what it tells me is that somebody wants to do that, fine, but we have to be involved in the process, just like we were with the Mill Creek acquisition.
If it said that, if it said that we would seek mitigation, but this is discouraging it, and our no net loss policy says we don't allow it. And that's where it's conflicted for me.
I see it the same.
I do agree with that part of it as far as not being, I don't think that it's something that's enforceable, and I think we're going to see that with the money that's already been allocated, last year by Feinstein for, is it Goose Creek?
Hurdy-gurdy.
I mean Hurdy-gurdy. You know, we negotiated, you know, we had a couple people on the negotiations with that, and that money was allocated or is marked for the purchase of that property.
I think
don't see
it's,
where we have any weight.
since I sat on part of the negotiation team on that also, my issue is they asked for our support of that agreement. I have never seen the agreement. I don't know who gets paid, where money goes. And I think for full disclosure, I think for this board to support a negotiated deal, the public needs to be aware of what's in the deal. Because I don't know how we can support that and say, you won't show us what your deal is, but you want us to support it? That's ridiculous. I think the community is owed that. And I think because taxpayer money is involved, I think any taxpaying citizen should know what's in that agreement. And whether it's a private property selling, yes, I agree. I'm all in favor of private property rights. But I think once you get taxpayer money involved, it should be fully disclosed, and it's never been fully disclosed. No, the agreement has never been disclosed. We've asked for that several times on the hurdy-gurdy deal. We've never seen the agreement between Smith River Alliance and
well, I guess what I would bring to the table is that we have been successful in the past with Mill Creek, even though it might not have been enough. It was $5 million. We were significant. We were mitigated when it came to Goose Creek. There was another property that we were mitigated. So, is it a viable tactic? You're darn right it is. Did it slow down the federal government or some of these other nonprofits that would take private land off the tax rolls and give it to the public? Did it slow it down? You're darn right it did. So I think we agreed on the no net loss concept. It has been a viable negotiating tactic, and it better stay in place.
I wasn't asking to take it out of there.
Oh.
She was just identifying it wasn't enforceable.
Okay, aside from those two items, anything else?
I like some of the other stuff.
Yeah, the Van Scoyoc stuff I thought was pretty good.
You know, fortunately, we sat down, 8 years ago, and did our priorities, and did our goals, and did our visioning. And all these, so it's just a natural progression that these come out of it. This is because we did our homework before, and nothing is that drastically changed.
We're still moving it.
We're moving the ball forward, you
This
bet.
document reflects a number of those goals and policies from several years ago. It was made much easier because those goals and policies were in place, and the board's been consistent, albeit there are going to be disagreements on philosophy, but been pretty consistent so that we could give that information to Van Scoyoc, and they were able to present that. That's the newest portion of this. The state side has stayed pretty consistent. The issues are, unfortunately, the issues have stayed consistent.
Well, and my thoughts when talking with Jay about this earlier is that we bring this forward every year so that the board just reconfirms if there's any amendments or changes to it. But the board, I think there needs to be an up-to-date reaffirmation of this is where we stand on issues overall as a board. And it does give the ability, because sometimes there are issues that come up in Sacramento or DC or area that things are going to come up before we have a meeting. So at least if our advocates know where we stand in general on things, then it gives them somewhere to go with that. So I think that's a plus thing, and hopefully we'll continue to do this every year going forward.
One little piece of housekeeping. So as far as the infrastructure section, if we refer to the terminal project and the runway safety project, does the board want to see this again, or do you want to just amend it with, or adopt it with that language amended?
I think that you should adopt it with
The amended language.
We will correct it then, and I will speak with Mr. Bernard prior to that.
You know, if the airport improvement adopted airport improvement plan. Also has a part of it, a 20-year planning, which has to do with runway extension, then it should remain in there. But rather than single out extension or expansion, because that was adopted at a time when we thought we were going to lose the Brazilias, and we probably aren't, it may be a moot point. So let's just, a higher level of focus would be the airport improvement plan.
Okay. Any public comment? Mr. Feller.
Scott Feller, District Representative for Senator Lamalfa. If I might suggest is that once you've adopted this plan, is to present it to, I will carry it back to the senator, but to send it to all your elected officials, because a lot of times staff, especially in remote counties, doesn't understand what the priorities are. And if they have a priority goals and basically a mission or vision statement for the community as to the legislative needs, they have something to look back at it, and if it pops up, they can go, oh, wait a minute, we need to contact that county. A lot of times it's just flat missed. Okay. It will help them give direction.
Okay, so direction of staff then, once that's,
yeah,
I think we need
standard process. You know, we don't necessarily post it. It could be put on the internet.
That's a good idea, and just in
That's a
case
good
we
idea.
had somebody working on something.
Any other questions, comments? So I'll
You know,
entertain.
I
Yeah, go ahead.
I can't let this lie, I guess. Getting back to the whole net loss thing, this particular hurdy-gurdy creek thing that we were talking about had to do with a private seller and a private buyer, which from the very start I said, we do not need to get involved in that because that's a private property rights. Our support was asked for when one of those private parties was then going to sell it to the federal government, and that's where they wanted our support. And that's where we could not give support, I felt, because we didn't know what the deal was, and the county needed to be properly mitigated for. So I just wanted to clarify that. When you get down to private property rights, and you got a private seller and a private buyer, that's none of our business. But when it starts getting into federal or state monies, then I think it is our business. I just...
Okay.
Private.
We'll, this could go on for a long time. So since
it has,
I'll entertain a motion.
We're in good spirits.
Yeah, that's good.
Move to approve and accept.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. We already did public comment, so could you please poll the vote?
Supervisor McClure?
Yes.
Supervisor Hemmingsen?
Yes.
Supervisor McNamer?
Yes.
Supervisor Finigan?
Yes.
Supervisor Sullivan?
Yes. And consider miscellaneous legislative budget matters pertinent to the County of Del Norte. Mr. Serena?
Well, as far as the budget is concerned, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, we are finishing up the mid-year analysis. We've gone through all of the budgets. We had one budget come in late and another one that needed a lot of corrections. And the one coming in late needed correction. So the auditor is in the process of adding in some changes to some of those lines. We've got a few things that obviously they're easy housekeeping, but tedious, so he has to sit down and go through those. One of the unintended consequences of AB 109 is associated with a in-treatment or in-custody drug treatment program, and at this point is going to cost the county a considerable amount of revenue, and that's through the sheriff's office. It was something I don't think that was thought up when AB 109 legislation was put in place, and these are the cleanup things, and these are some of the problems that happen when realignment happens, and we're still seeing some of those from, I think, 1991. But it is a significant issue. It will affect us in this budget year, and it will affect us next budget year if there's not some cleanup. And so I've spoken with Supervisor Finigan to carry the word with CSAC. The sheriff and the Sheriff's Association is also involved, and the Chief Probation Officer. So I think we've got it covered from a lot of different angles. But it still will not necessarily help us financially this year unless there's some sort of backup. There will be a budget memo for the next board meeting, and it will likely have some alternatives for cost-saving strategies in the short term. means between now and the end of the year. Obviously, what we're looking at is not just the impacts to this budget, but what that will impact rolling over to next year. And of course, there's limited actions that the board can take at this point to deal with these issues mid-year. But we will go over all of the any of the advantages or new revenues that might have come in, or any of those changes, and then any of the significant issues. So you'll see that at the next board meeting. Legislatively, we continue to follow any legislation that's being processed. We get weekly updates through CSAC as well as through our advocates regarding state legislation. On the federal level, SRS is still the primary out there. It was put in the president's budget, but it's still being discussed. So we continue to monitor those, and our advocates are working on those also. I'm sure David is in the middle of whatever.
Well, one thing I didn't mention is we did have a Secure Rural Schools Board of Directors meeting last week by the phone. We were asked to weigh in on the Assembly bill, which has to do with management of the forest and using.
Is that the House?
That's the House bill.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that the revenues being generated over proper management of the forests. In other words, not asking for any free handouts anymore, but to get off the government dole and to allow for the resource to dictate the economy and that we historically enjoyed. That, however, is going to take, I would say, 5 years. Some people say 10 years, but it's going to take at least 5 years to engage in that process with management. Some of that we've laid the ground with the MOU with the Forest Service, so we get to have those discussions. And so I think it's optimistic that some of the reasonable people will come to agreement on how to manage the forest, and there will be some revenues, whether it's through biomass or whether it's through vegetative management or whatever, through proper management of the national forests. However, in the interim, the Senate side has a bill that calls for a ramp down. And what will probably happen, what we're hoping will happen, since the last payment, by the way, has been made, is that the Senate bill gets put in an emergency appropriation somewhere along the line, and they will backfill this year. It will be retroactive. And that includes, I believe, a 5% ramp down per year for perhaps 5 years. It would be nice if they were both merged together, so you could have the safety net of the Senate bill for the ramp down, and then the forest management practices being worked on as in the House bill that will allow us to once again take full utilization of our resources and not have to have a special allocation from the federal government to pay for something they historically agreed to pay for. That's the long and the short of it. We supported it.
Okay. Just to reiterate too on our ledge platform that if staff can send to all our state and federal elected officials our platforms, just to have them to know where we're and put it on our
standard
website
process. So yes,
and we are going to put it on the website.
Yes, I got that noted.
Okay. At this point, we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting.